I mean, everyone knows that a south-facing roof is best for solar, or north-facing if you live below the equator. But what if the roofs on your property face east and west? Can that actually be better than south-north? Let's find out. Hi there, I'm Gary and welcome back to my channel, Gary Does Solar. If you live in the northern hemisphere, the sun tracks across the sky from east to west, reaching its peak directly south at midday. This leads to a widespread belief that for solar panels to work effectively, you'll need a south-facing roof to mount them on. And if your roof doesn't face south, well, many people assume it's just not worth investing in solar. And given that properties face all manner of directions across the country, does that mean a high percentage of homes are simply out of luck? Well, in this video I want to explore the relative generation profiles of solar arrays on south, east, west and even north roofs, and why having an east and west roof can actually provide benefits over and above a south roof. And finally, the big question, if you have panels on both your east and west roofs, can that actually beat the same setup on south and north roofs? Let's get into it. For our analysis, we're going to be looking at two identical properties, which I've built using EasyPV, a utility developed by Midsummer Energy. You might remember that utility was mentioned in a recent interview I carried out with Midsummer in this video here. Catch the link in the description if you want to watch it. The property on the left has one roof facing east and the other roof facing west, and the property on the right has a south-facing roof. Now that second property also has a north-facing roof, of course, and that's something that we'll be looking at later on. We'll assume that both these properties are in the northern hemisphere, actually in the UK. But if you're living in the southern hemisphere, simply reverse the directions. Think north when I mention south and vice versa. East and west remain the same, of course. Okay, let's now put some solar panels onto the east, west and south roofs using EasyPV. In fact, we'll put some panels on the north roof as well to complete the picture. We'll use 470 watt ICO NeoStar 3S panels and we'll fit 2 rows of 6 panels onto the south roof. So that's an array size of 12 times 470 watts, which equals 5.64 kilowatts peak. We'll then fit the same number of panels onto each of the east, west and north roofs. Now you might be thinking that for a fair comparison, if there are 16 panels on the south roof, we should split them and put 8 panels onto each of the east and west roofs. I mean, an argument could certainly be made for that, but in practice solar panels are very cheap compared to the overall cost of installation. And so if you're going to fit panels to a particular roof at all, you might as well fit as many panels as you can there, and so we'll put the same number of panels onto each roof. Okay then, before we get into the numbers, let's step back a little and look at the solar generation profiles of all these arrays, starting with the array on the south roof. The solar generation profile of a south-facing solar array in the UK during summer follows a symmetrical bell-shaped curve like this. The array begins generating power in the early morning, then peaks around midday when the sunlight is at its strongest, and then tapers off towards the early evening. While the curve itself shows power generated at any given time, the area under the curve shows the total energy generated across the day. And depending on the size of your array, that generated energy is likely to be way more than you would ever use on a given day. But here's the problem. If we overlay a typical home energy usage profile, you can see 3 issues. In the morning, we're consuming energy, but there is little solar generation to cover that, and so we'll be drawing from the grid. The same is true in the early evening. In fact, at this time we'll be generally consuming quite a bit of energy, not least cooking the evening meal and putting the dishwasher on afterwards. The trouble is, solar generation has tapered off by this time, so again we'll be drawing from the grid. And finally, in the middle of the day, when we're generally not using very much energy at all, solar generation is at its highest. What to do with all that extra energy? Thankfully, there are things that can be done to mitigate all of these problems. The most obvious of these is by installing a home battery alongside your solar panels. And if your home battery capacity is large enough, you can charge it up with all of that solar generation, and it will power all of your home usage without ever needing to draw from the grid. Here's my video on how to work out what size of battery would work for your own situation. The link is in the description. But you know, even then, in the summer, you're likely to fill your battery by mid-morning, so there's still a lot of generation you might not be able to use. Depending on the country you live in and the tariff you're on, you might be able to export that extra generation and earn some revenue from it. But I'm noting that more and more countries now don't pay for export anymore, and worse still, they might even charge you for it. There are other ways to soak up all that extra generation in the middle of the day, of course. You can run heavy appliances like clothes washing machines and dishwashers during that time. Or you might choose to prepare your evening meal earlier on in the day so that it's ready for later. Okay, that's the property on the south-facing roof. Let's now contrast that with the property with the arrays on the east and west-facing roofs. Just a reminder of the south-facing solar generation profile again, and now we'll see what the generation profile looks like for the east-facing array first. As you can see, it's not a straightforward bell curve. Instead, it's skewed towards the left. And perhaps that's not surprising, as the roof captures solar not long after the sun comes up. Then by mid-morning, the generation starts to tail off for the rest of the day. Let's now look at the generation profile for the west-facing array. It's essentially a mirror image of the east-facing array. At the start of the day, there's not much generation, as the sun is in the east, limiting sunlight on the panels. But as the sun moves towards the west, the level of sunlight on the panels increases, eventually driving robust generation all through the afternoon and early evening. By the way, I'm particularly interested in the generation during the early evening, and we'll come back to that later. If we add together the generation profiles of both the east and west facing arrays, we get this. It's almost double the generation of the south array. And what's even better, if we overlay the typical home energy usage profile again, you can see that the generation of the east and west arrays cover both the morning and evening usage peaks. Essentially, with east and west arrays, the generation is more spread out across the whole day. You can see this better if we normalise the east and west array profile against the south array. The east and west arrays extend the overall generation profile at both ends of the day. You could potentially make the argument that with east and west arrays, you might not need to buy as big a home battery. That's fine for the summer, but remember in the winter, that's when the battery really comes into its own. Again, have a look at my battery sizing video mentioned earlier. One advantage that you definitely do have though with east and west arrays is a greater time period throughout the day to use heavy appliances without having to draw from the grid. Nice. By the way, if you're getting a lot from my videos, please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell icon. It really helps spread the word. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to look at the typical annual generation data for each of our arrays, east, west, south and north, so that we can make some comparisons between them. And to do this, we're going to use my Solarasma utility. I've chosen a location in southern England and entered the details for the south array. If you remember, each array comprises 16 ICO NeoStar 3S panels, each at 470 watts, so that's a total array size of 5.64 kilowatts peak. As it's a south array, I've set the orientation to 180 degrees as a compass bearing, and I'll make the pitch 35 degrees, but you can play with this figure to suit your own property if you wish. When I click here, the utility reaches out to PVGIS to compute the solar generation for that array. You can see a nice bell curve for the daily generation profile, but we're now interested in moving down to the annual solar generation chart here. Over the year, the south-facing array is estimated to produce 6,092 kilowatt hours of energy. We'll now change the direction of the array to east, which is 90 degrees on a compass bearing, and then recompute. The estimated annual generation is now slightly less at 4,763 kilowatt hours. Let's change the direction of the array again, this time to west, so that's 270 degrees as a compass bearing, keeping everything else the same. And we get an estimated annual solar generation of 4,820 kilowatt hours. Finally, to complete the picture, we'll change the direction of the array once more, this time to north, and so that's 0 degrees. And when we compute the annual generation, we get 3,183 kilowatt hours. Let's now compare all these results. It's not surprising that the south-facing array has the highest level of generation, about 27% more than the generation of either the east or the west arrays. But it doesn't beat an east and west array combined together, which produces 9,583 kilowatt hours. That's a whopping 57% more than the south array. It's already clear to me then that if you have an east-west facing property and you maximise the number of panels on both those roofs, you will generate far more than your neighbour who might have a south-facing roof. Finally, let's answer the big question then. That neighbour may also have a north-facing roof, So will south plus north beat east plus west? Let's see by adding the numbers up. Well, it's very close, but in our example here, the east and west arrays win with nearly 3.5% more generation than the south and north arrays. It looks like east and west really is best. And I believe there's another reason why east and west is better, and it's all to do with paid export. I think you know from some of my other videos that export rates across the world are under threat. Many countries have now reduced the rates paid for export, and some countries have started charging you for any exports you make. But so long as there is an early evening peak demand nationally that cannot be met with renewable sources like wind and hydro, if you have a west-facing array, I think there will be an opportunity for you to get paid handsomely for any export at that time. Take a look at tariffs like these from Octopus Energy, a UK energy provider I rate highly, that actually pay more for export between 4 and 7 p.m. The second of these, Intelligent Octopus Flux, is actually a virtual power plant service which can pay high levels of export because they are aggregating your solar and battery to provide a variety of grid services, each earning competitive fees. You can find out more about these tariffs in the video description, and switching to Octopus is very easy. Just use my referral code here and you'll get £50 credited to your account. I'll also get £50, which allows me to keep making videos like this for you. Thank you. Hopefully then in this video I've been able to show you that even if you don't have a south-facing roof, it's still well worth getting solar. In fact, you're actually in a better position if you can do both your east and west roofs at the same time. Make sure you choose a great installer though. In the UK there are over 4,000 installers, and unfortunately they're not all looking after your interests. That's why I created my own solar installer directory, to save you time and effort when carrying out your due diligence. Nearly 3,500 of you have used the service so far, with many of you completing your installations. Just type getreadyfor.solar into your browser. Thanks for watching this video. All too often people have a perception about things, but there's nothing like getting down to the actual data to see the truth, and I hope that you enjoy the approach that I'm taking in these videos. As ever, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters, including these on the highest tiers. Sign up and you can get access to the modelling utility used earlier. I've deliberately kept the pricing low to make it more accessible to everyone. It's also a great way to support the channel. Keep watching for other ways to support my work after the end titles, and I'm about to start working on the next video right now. See you soon.